What would you do if a complete stranger texted you the exact location of your cheating boyfriend? Down to the very minute. Lena's life shattered when she discovered her boyfriend was sleeping with a woman named Brianna. She kicked him out of their apartment, but moments later she received a message from an unknown number. The mysterious man warned her that her drunk ex was in a parking garage on 41st Street and would be at her door in exactly 40 minutes. How did he know? Because Adrian Voss, a notoriously dangerous underground businessman, had been quietly watching her for 3 weeks.
The camera pushes in on Lena Carter. Notice the violent trembling in her hands, the raw physical proof of a soul tearing apart, fueled by 3 fast shots of cheap agave liquor. Her hollow eyes reflect the sudden shattering of a 7-year illusion. She types a text born from sheer, blinding agony. I hope you rot. But the immediate reply does not come from the man who broke her. It flashes on the glowing screen from an unknown number. This single mistake will drag her into a darkness deeper than she could ever anticipate. Today, you and I are going to unpack this tragedy together. The lesson here is simple. Betrayal never just breaks the heart, it infects the bone. Before we examine the anatomy of this obsession, please subscribe and engage with our channel to support the work. Please take a moment to subscribe, activate your notifications, and leave a comment telling me where you are watching from tonight. Now, pour yourself a warm coffee and let us frame the opening shot. The nightmare begins with the subtle shift in the air. The scent lingering in their apartment is not Marcus's expensive cologne from Madison Avenue. It is sickeningly sweet, a heavy floral perfume, the unmistakable trace of another woman's skin pressed intimately against his. Lena stands completely frozen in the bedroom doorway. She is still gripping the warm take-out bag from her long commute, trapped in the agonizing paralysis of denial. Life teaches us that sometimes the most brutal, life-altering truths do not arrive with a scream, but with an absolute, terrifying silence. The warm container holds orange chicken, his absolute favorite meal. The camera lingers on her face as profound cognitive dissonance sets in. Her mind is finally unearthing every tiny lie and late-night excuse she had buried for months. She manages to choke out his name, her vocal cords tight with pure adrenaline. From the bathroom, over the gentle hiss of running water, Marcus responds with sickening casualness. He hums a Stevie Wonder melody, totally blind to the catastrophe about to engulf him. The heat of the food fades into her trembling palm as she does something she has avoided for 7 years. She reaches out and takes his unsecured phone from the dresser. It sits there, a quiet testament to the arrogant tragedy of a narcissist who believes his lies are bulletproof. The glowing screen delivers an immediate, fatal blow, a message from Brianna, decorated with bright, romantic symbols. Her trembling fingers act on their own, tapping the photograph to open it, and the floor entirely drops out from beneath her reality. The image shows Marcus lounging in an unfamiliar hotel room, leaning back against crisp white sheets. He wears that soft, intimate smile Lena foolishly believed belonged only to her. The cruelest detail is the date stamped at the top. Tuesday. The exact same Tuesday Lena spent 14 agonizing hours sitting in a cold hospital ward, gripping her sick mother's hand. Marcus had looked her in the eyes and blamed his absence on a punishing deadline at work. Trust is a fragile glass, and once shattered, it cuts deep into the skin. He had looked her in the face and sworn he slept at his office desk, a flawless, calculated lie. Suddenly, the rushing water in the shower stops. She can hear the soft friction of a towel against his skin, his cheerful humming echoing down the hall. The sheer panic hits Lena so hard her hand spasms, nearly dropping the glowing phone onto the hardwood floor. Through sheer willpower, She sets it down in its exact original spot. She silently drifts into the kitchen, sets the takeout bag onto the island, and presses both hands flat against the freezing stone just to remember how to breathe. Marcus strolls in wearing casual clothes, completely oblivious to the suffocating tension in the room. He smiles and praises the smell of the food, unaware his entire world has just ended. She refuses to look at him. Staring straight ahead, she simply asks who Brianna is. The silence that follows is suffocating, the exact reaction of a predator caught outside its carefully built cage. You might be wondering the exact same thing I did when I first studied this case. How does a narcissist recalibrate when cornered? I count the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. She finally turns to face him, detailing the hotel photograph in a dead, hollow voice. The camera would capture a tiny, rapid twitch in Marcus's jaw, a man frantically calculating his own damage control. Instead of offering an ounce of remorse, he goes on the attack. He violently deflects the accusation, turning the situation around to scream about her invading his digital privacy. It is a pathetic defense. Lena's voice cracks right down the middle, a tiny fracture of weakness that fills her with self-disgust. The tragic irony pours out of her. She paints the brutal contrast between her 14 agonizing hours in a sterile hospital room watching doctors intubate her dying mother, lied while he was wrapped in hotel sheets with a stranger. Marcus steps forward, raising his hands in a desperate attempt to pacify the room, telling her to lower her voice. That single, pathetic command unleashes a feral, primal rage she never knew she possessed. Lena begins to scream, hurling the sheer weight of their 7 devoted years against his shallow betrayal. And Marcus? He falls back on the most common, empty defense of a guilty man. He looks at her and tells her she is completely delusional. As observers of this tragic human theater, you and I can recognize this exact, shattering turning point. Lena watches her partner frantically try to stitch together a believable lie in real time and fail miserably. Under the harsh kitchen lights, she experiences a moment of absolute freezing clarity. She sees him not as her lover, but as a deeply dangerous stranger who has permanently scarred her soul. She points to the door and demands he leave. He weakly tries to argue his name is on the lease, but her glare is absolute steel. Marcus finally walks out into the cold night at 9:30, grabbing only a small bag and the expensive watch she bought for his birthday. He reaches out for one last embrace, but she flinches away in pure revulsion. The home they built is dead. The heavy click of the deadbolt echoes through the empty apartment with a terrifying finality. Lena instantly collapses onto the cold ceramic kitchen tiles, pressing her burning cheek against the floor to ground spinning reality. A sound tears out of her throat that defies description. It is not a gentle sob, nor is it a simple scream of anger. It is the raw, primal frequency of absolute isolation. It is the sound of a woman realizing she has been completely alone in a mirage of a relationship for 7 years. The hardest lesson in life is discovering that the person holding your hand was never really there. Her phone buzzes against the cold floor. It is her fiercely loyal friend Jessica, announcing she is already on her way over. The fallout of his betrayal has now begun. Jessica Nguyen has been Lena's truest emotional anchor since they were wide-eyed teenagers figuring out the world. Moving with the fierce protective instinct of a blood sister, Jessica never waits for an invitation to fix a crisis. She breaches the front door exactly 8 minutes later, armed with a heavy bottle of expensive tequila, a bag of frozen comfort food, and the furious energy of a woman whose darkest suspicions have just been proven right. She instantly takes command of the suffocating room, pouring the burning alcohol into 2 glasses and demanding they drink. Jessica immediately unleashes a torrent of fiery insults at the man who just left, finally giving a voice to the countless red flags she had quietly noticed in Marcus over the years. True friends are the cure. You and I can easily chart the desperate trajectory of a broken heart seeking refuge in alcohol. After the 3rd heavy glass, the massive emotional dams holding Lena together completely shatter, leaving her sobbing against the kitchen counter. By the 5th pour, a strange, delirious humor takes over, and they find themselves laughing viciously at the weird, uneven shape of Marcus's head. But after the 7th drink, the room goes dark. The laughter dies, replaced by a cold, venomous rage that only surfaces when a victim realizes how long they have been played for a fool. Lena grabs her phone, desperate to hurl her hatred directly at her abuser. Jessica, stepping into the role of the rational protector, forcefully yanks the device away to stop her from doing something she will regret. Through a haze of tears and alcohol, Lena articulates a profound truth about surviving trauma. She whispers that if she does not force this poison out of her system right now, it will fester in her bones forever. She begs for a compromise. She will only type out the words, just to see them bleed onto the bright screen, but she swears she will not press send. Jessica studies her fractured friend for a long moment and finally steps back. Lena grips the glowing phone with violently shaking hands. She pours every ounce of her broken soul into a digital manifesto. She brands him a pathetic coward, a chronic liar, and prays that time rots his hollow heart. The camera closes in tightly on her trembling thumb, hovering dangerously over the blue arrow of release. Words are dangerous weapons. Let us pull the camera back to this precise, irreversible fraction of a second. This is the moment the tragedy seals her fate. A slip of the thumb, just half an inch of trembling flesh, and the message flies into the digital void, far beyond reach beside her. Jessica's eyes widen as the screen glows in the dim room, instantly attempting to reframe the disaster. She speaks rapidly, calling it some twisted form of karma, but the camera lingers on Lena. The sound of friend's voice fades into a muffled, distant hum. The cold, bluish light of the phone illuminates the utter shock pooling in Lena's wide, terrified eyes. The number hovering above the text does not belong to the man who spent years breaking her spirit. It is a complete unknown, a ghost in the machine. Stick with me, as this is where the shadows deepen and the real nightmare begins. The glowing interface reveals a sequence of 10 raw, unassigned digits. It is a total rupture of her known world. Lena's voice cracks, a brittle sound in the quiet room as she tells her friend the venom was sent to the wrong soul. Jessica steps into the frame, her shoulder pressing into Lena's, desperate to anchor her. She spins a comforting lie, insisting it is just a sleeping stranger who will delete the angry words by sunrise. For 11 agonizingly slow seconds, the camera holds steady. Lena exhales. Her trembling shoulders drop. The fragile illusion of safety wraps around them, slowing the chaotic drumming in her chest. And then the silence shatters. The phone vibrates. Both women freeze. Jessica's hands hover over the device, her voice sharp and commanding, begging Lena not to look. She fully expects another venomous strike from Marcus. But the compulsion of a wounded heart is a tragic thing to witness. Lena opens the message. The words on the illuminated glass are chillingly composed. You have a beautiful rhythm when you type angry, almost musical. I assume this was not meant for me. Jessica's instincts scream danger, immediately urging Lena to block the phantom caller. Yet, beneath the haze of cheap wine and sheer exhaustion, a profound, primal dread anchors itself in Lena's bones. You can almost see the cold sea spreading through her veins. Stripped of all logic, her trembling thumbs betray her, tapping out a tragic surrender. I am so sorry. Let us zoom in on this single, devastating frame, because this is where the psychological jaws snap shut. Lena sends her desperate excuse, blaming the alcohol, swearing the words were meant for her ex. 3 slow beats pass. Then, the stranger's reply flashes across the glass. I do not forget much, Lena. The sight of her own name drains the blood from her face. She stops breathing entirely. Jessica shatters the heavy silence, her voice escalating into pure panic, demanding to know how this ghost knows her identity. Block him right now, she pleads. Lena's trembling thumb hovers above the glowing red option to sever the connection, but every instinct demands she retreat. But the darkness is hypnotic. Her hand drifts away from the button. She steps willingly into the abyss. Driven by a fatal curiosity, she types the fateful question, "How do you know my name?" The reply cuts through the darkness with terrifying precision. It paints a picture from 3 weeks ago, outside a dimly lit restaurant on 52nd Street. The message perfectly replays the memory. Lena, weeping after a brutal argument, colliding with a stranger, apologizing and calling herself a total mess. It repeats his exact haunting reply, "Do not apologize. Messy nights are sometimes the honest ones." As Lena reads the screen, the ambient noise of the room completely drops away. Her throat turns to ash. The buried memory violently resurrects itself. The heavy stench of Marcus's gin. The searing humiliation as he tore down her dignity in public. The desperate, blinding urge to run. The buried memory snaps into sharp focus. She can almost feel the rough wool of a dark coat against her shoulder. She remembers a soothing voice offering grace in her darkest hour, just before Marcus's cruel grip clamped down on her sleeve, dragging her back into his personal hell. Turning slowly, her face washed in pale light, Lena whispers the confession to Jessica. She really did meet this ghost. Jessica's rational mind fractures, demanding to know how a fleeting bump on the sidewalk ends with a stolen phone number. Before the question settles in the stifling air, the screen flashes again. Breathe, Lena. I am not going to hurt you. The watcher can somehow see her chest heaving in panic. The device slips from her trembling fingers, hitting the floor with a hollow thud. Jessica fiercely reclaims her role as protector. She drops to her knees, reaching for the fallen device, swearing to shut this madness down. But the screen is already flooding with chilling details. The Phantom Watcher reports that Marcus is currently sitting in a garage on 41st Street. He is drinking heavily with the woman who broke Lena's heart, and he plans to drive here in exactly 40 minutes. The text perfectly maps out the abuser's pathetic apology tour, ordering Lena to lock the deadbolt. The sheer godlike omniscience of the message paralyzes the room entirely. Jessica's fiery confidence burns out, replaced by a trembling, terrified whisper. What did you invite in the deepest, darkest corners of Lena's mind? A horrifying clarity begins to take permanent shape. How could a total stranger possess such intimate knowledge of her tormentor's vile habits? Shaking uncontrollably, Lena claws the phone back and types a desperate plea into the void. Who are you? The camera holds on the agonizing delay. 50 slow seconds stretch into an eternity, pulling her anxiety tight like a piano wire. When the response finally bleeds onto the screen, it reveals a terrifying portrait of a self-appointed savior. He confesses to watching her suffer in the shadows for 3 entire weeks, warning that his mercy is running dry. He commands her to lock the doors, softly validating the deep emotional wounds Marcus inflicted. The glowing screen fades to black at exactly 11:47 p.m. 37 minutes later, a heavy, thunderous fist slams violently against the apartment door. The man on the other side of the heavy wood is indeed the monster himself. His fists batter the door in aggressive, entitled rhythms of three. His slurred voice leaks through the frame, twisting sweet nicknames into toxic demands for entry. Jessica lunges forward, wrapping her arms around Lena's waist and dragging her away from the threshold. She sees the tragic softening in Lena's eyes, the deeply ingrained instinct to surrender to the man who breaks her. Jessica grips her shoulders, fiercely whispering the terrifying truth. The shadow on the phone predicted every single step of this drunken nightmare, and it is manifesting right now. It is this haunting realization that an invisible phantom is orchestrating the night, that turns the blood in Lena's veins to absolute ice. She cannot move a single muscle. You and I must pause here to fully grasp the sheer tragedy of this scene. A completely faceless stranger understands the man Lena loved for 7 years better than she ever could. From the dim hallway, Marcus launches a pathetic lie, roaring that he can see the light in her window. Lena physically recoils, clutching her chest as panic strikes. But Jessica remains the steadfast guardian, quickly dismantling the deception. The bedroom window faces a blind alley. It is an impossible lie designed to break her down. Jessica signals for total, deathly silence, hoping the monster will eventually exhaust himself. Yet, a narcissist denied is a deeply dangerous thing. Marcus's voice turns into a weaponized roar, pounding the frame. He hurls broken apologies through the painted wood, demanding to see his prize immediately. The relentless pounding shatters the fragile walls of Lena's sanity. Jessica pulls her down against the floorboards, wrapping arms tightly around her trembling brain to muffle the hideous noise. The camera captures the profound agony tearing through Lena's mind. She cannot merge the violent beast kicking at her door with the uncharming man who once sat at her family's dinner table. The betrayal is a wound too deep to measure. Outside, the slurred begging curdles into vicious demands, flooding the room with suffocating terror. Choking on her tears, Lina finally whispers the fatal words, "We need to call the police." In that exact terrifying second, as if the shadows themselves are listening to her pounding heart, the phone vibrates on the floor. Jessica wildly begs her to look away. Lena looks anyway. The glowing text reveals a power that borders on the supernatural. "Do not call the police. I have already sent someone. He will be gone in under 4 minutes. Stay away from the door." The gravity of those violent words drains the remaining strength from Lena's legs, collapsing her against the cold baseboards. She stammers is the terrifying promise out loud to Jessica, whose face instantly twists into a mask of pure dread. This is no longer just a digital stalker. It is an executioner entering their physical world. Jessica lunges to tear the phone from Lena's grip. She screams about the grim realities of the nightly news, invoking the tragic fates of missing women, desperately fighting to shatter the hypnotic trance this invisible predator has firmly woven around her shattered friend. Let's look closely at the room. Jessica stands near the window, the harsh street lamp carving shadows across her face. She begs Lena not to romanticize this invisible predator, but the logic is already falling apart. The stranger knew exactly when Marcus would arrive, right down to the minute. How do you argue with that kind of dark precision? Outside, the drunken shouting of Marcus violently protests the cold night air, and then silence. The audio track of their reality just cuts out, snapping off mid-syllable. It is not a natural quiet. It is the suffocating stillness of a heavier, darker force pressing down. You and I both know the cold dread of abrupt silence. Both women freeze, breathing trapped in their lungs, completely at the mercy of the unseen. The acoustic texture of the hallway shifts entirely. Gone is the erratic, drunken stumbling. In its place, two sets of heavy, metronomic footfalls echo through the plaster. This is the slow, deliberate rhythm of apex predators who have absolutely nothing to fear. A deep, measured, baritone voice cuts through the tension, politely informing Marcus that his night is over. Marcus, desperate to hold on to his crumbling territory, tries to resist. We hear the brief, pitiful scuffle, a muffled grunt, the sudden, heavy thud of bone and flesh slamming into drywall. It happens with the cold, mechanical detachment of moving a piece of furniture. It teaches us a harsh truth. Pride means absolutely nothing. When faced with true, quiet power, the threat is neutralized, stripped of all dignity. When Marcus finally speaks again, his voice is a broken, trembling whisper. The grandiosity has been violently ripped out of him, leaving only a rapid, submissive stutter behind. The two nameless enforcers herd him toward the exit like a wounded animal. The heavy elevator gears grind, swallow their cargo, and sink into the shaft, leaving an agonizingly hollow silence in the apartment. Jessica, completely paralyzed by the adrenaline flooding her veins, drops to her hands and knees and crawls toward the door, desperate for proof. But before Lena can even blink, the glowing screen of her phone pierces the dark room. A new message arrives. The stranger assures her the problem is handled, erased, forgotten. This is the ultimate lesson. Absolute power rarely needs to raise its voice. The camera pushes in on Lena, capturing the exact moment her reality begins to crack. The text demands she go to sleep, pretending it was just building security. Stripped bare by alcohol and exhaustion, she stares at the unnatural light. Her trembling thumbs type 3 words, "Who are you?" The delay hangs in the air before the name appears, Adrian Voss. Jessica's survival instincts flare up instantly. She whispers, asking for the laptop. Lena simply hands it over. Her arms move, but her mind is miles away, floating near the ceiling. It reminds us how trauma works. Sometimes the body simply disconnects to survive the shock of what the mind cannot process. The heavy gravity of a terrifying new realities has already taken root in the cold apartment. Come with me. Let us look over their shoulders as the search results load in the dark. The screen illuminates the terrifying footprint of a Shadow King. Headlines flash like warning sirens. Patriarch dead. Son takes over the empire. Federal probes stalled. The man running the darkest corners of the city. Jessica's face contorts into pure terror, the biological response of prey realizing the lion is inside the house. Lena leans in, her eyes fixing on the fourth search result, a photograph. In an instant, the blood drains from her face, leaving her skin ice cold. The lesson here is brutal. The past never truly stays in the past. The piercing eyes staring back from the glowing screen do not belong to a stranger. They belong to a man she already knows. The camera flashes back, pulling us into the haze of a dimly lit restaurant 3 weeks ago. It was supposed to be nothing. Just a fleeting, messy moment of vulnerability over a spilled drink. She had looked up into those same grey eyes, and he had delivered a line carved with terrifying precision. Messy nights are sometimes the honest ones. Now, trapped in her apartment, the memory crashes into her with physical force. Lena collapses onto the floor beside Jessica, burying her face in her hands. A violent, volatile sound rips from her throat. a brutal collision between a laugh and a sob. Sometimes we must learn that innocence is an illusion. The human heart shatters when it realizes it has caught the obsessive, unblinking gaze of a monster. The tragedy has officially begun. The absolute weight of her mistake presses down on her chest, suffocating the last remnants of her normal life. "I sent that text to a Mafia boss," she whispers, her words fracturing into the quiet room. "He sent actual men to my door." Jessica, desperate to rebuild the shattered walls of their safety, grips Lena's hands tight. She lays out the rules of survival. Go to bed, call in sick, change the locks, and bury this night forever. It is the tragic human's instinct to simply look away from the fire. But locking the door does nothing when the ghost is already inside the house. You cannot build a physical wall against a predator who has already begun mapping the fragile internal architecture of your mind. The invasion is complete, entirely invisible, and impossible to undo. Jessica offers the last shred of physical comfort, promising to carry Lena down the rusted fire escape if the door handle so much as twitches. The dark humor pulls a weak, breathless laugh from Lena, a tiny release of poison from her blood, but the night is a cruel canvas. Left alone in the dark, the true damage takes root. Lena lies motionless in bed, staring at the ceiling, her phone heavy on the mattress. Every tiny noise in the building is magnified into a threat. The radiator hisses. A car tire hums on the wet pavement outside. She tries to separate the mundane from the menacing, failing utterly. Here is a quiet truth. Fear is a lonely room, and captivity begins the moment you stop trusting your own senses. The dark soil for a trauma bond has just been watered. The clock strikes 3:14 in the morning, and the digital tether pulls hard against her fraying sanity. The phone vibrates. 2 minutes later, it throbs again. "Are you awake, Lena?" Before her exhausted brain can even process the danger, her thumbs betray her, typing a single, obedient word, "Yes." His next move is a masterpiece of psychological violence. He does not boast about the men he sent. He simply asks, "Are you all right?" He wraps his iron grip in the soft velvet of concern. "I do not know what I am," she confesses into the dark. Then comes the freezing drop of the knife. "You searched my name." He sees her, even through the walls. We often forget that the most dangerous cages are not made of iron bars, but of the terrifying belief that someone knows our every move. He paints his madness as a simple matter of survival, calmly typing out that the horrific rumors online are mostly true, promising to explain it all later. It is a stunning display of manipulation, and right here, in the cold blue light of the screen, the tragedy shifts. Despite every screaming instinct telling her to run, a deeply broken piece of her soul feels a strange magnetic pull. She feels seen. It is a dangerous, fatal trap. The tragic human flaw, where being noticed by a monster somehow feels warmer than being entirely ignored by the rest of the world. Hating her own fingers for moving, she types out the question that seals her fate. "Why are you doing this?" The hook is set deeply, sinking right into the softest part of her damaged heart. His reply unravels a terrifying web of obsession masked as romantic destiny. He admits he sat in the shadows 3 weeks ago, watching her apologize to a man who did not deserve her grace. He saw her empathy, her soft compliance, and he marked her. He confesses to using his vast unseen empire to rip away her privacy, finding her home, her job, her history. He claims he wanted to stay away, but her accidental text forced his hand. "I decided the University had made a decision I was not willing to argue with." The arrogance is breathtaking. This is the oldest lie we tell ourselves to justify our sins, blaming the stars for the blood on our hands. The villain never believes he is attacking. He genuinely believes he is simply answering a higher, irresistible calling. Lena stares at the screen, her thumbs practically numb, telling him this is the most insane thing she has ever heard. But he easily deflects, softly renaming his stalking as simply paying attention. When she confesses that she is entirely paralyzed by fear, he offers her a warm, false blanket of safety, giving his absolute word that she can sleep in peace. She pushes back one last time, asking if the word of a criminal actually means anything. His reply is a masterstroke of dark isolation. To most people, no. To you, it will be. He is drawing a thick black circle around the two of them, erasing the rest of the world entirely. She does not type another word. The screen fades to black. The hardest lesson in life is that the deepest cages are locked from the inside. Let us open on a wide shot of absolute devastation. The unforgiving dawn bleeds through the blinds, casting long shadows across Lena's exhausted frame. Her body has finally surrendered to a restless sleep. We hear the harsh grind of Jessa making coffee at 10:47. The camera slowly pushes in on Lena's phone, illuminating the room with 11 missed calls from Marcus, the ghost of her past. But the true horror, the inciting incident of our tragedy, glows in a single text from Adrian Voss. A cup of black coffee, one sugar waiting at her door. The doorman let it through, a masterstroke of psychological terror disguised as tenderness. He is showing her that no lock, no wall, no earthly barrier can keep him out. The tension in the room thickens, nearly suffocating. Picture the profound disbelief on Lena's face as she begs Jessica to check the empty hallway. We cut to Jessica, stepping back inside, holding a steaming cup from an elite cafe like it is a live grenade. The threat has breached the castle walls. Watch the extreme close-up of Lena's trembling fingers as she unfolds the small, crisp card. The penmanship is immaculate, the strokes sharp and unyielding. Call in sick, rest today, initialed with a single sharp letter A. This is no gentle lover's note. This is the director calling action on her life. It is the cold, calculated command of a man slowly wrapping his fingers around the very pulse of her daily existence, demanding total surrender. Notice the subtle shift in the lighting here. The shadows deepen as the trauma bond takes root. Against every instinct of survival, Lena lifts the paper cup to her lips and drinks. It is crafted with terrifying perfection. The camera pans to Jessica, her eyes dark with a clinical dread. Listen to the raw desperation in her voice as she delivers the ultimate warning. That man is not a river you can wade into, she whispers. He is a current. Put one toe in and he drags you out to sea. It reminds us all that ignoring the quiet warnings of a true friend is often our first step toward ruin. Once our heroine accepts this dark communion, the psychological undertow grabs hold, pulling her violently away from any hope of rescue. We watch Jessica lay out the stark rules of survival. Block the number, erase the man, return to the simple, broken life of a woman grieving a normal heartbreak. On the surface, Lena nods. She promises to build the wall. But the lens lingers on the microtremors around Lena's mouth, the subtle shifting of her eyes. Jessica, carrying 17 years of shared history, sees the lie instantly. The heavy silence that follows is devastating. Without a single line of dialogue, Jessica snatches the empty cup, tosses it into the trash with a sharp thud, and aggressively packs her overnight bag. The physical anchor is severing itself from the ship. As the door closes, our protagonist is left utterly alone, drifting into the cold, waiting depths. The protective shield is gone. The heavy click of the deadbolt echoes like a gunshot, signaling Jessica's exit and leaving our subject completely exposed. Let us linger on this heartbreaking scene. Lena remains seated at the very kitchen island where her sanity began to fray. Instead of choosing salvation, she actively courts the abyss. Her screen glows against her pale skin as she opens the message thread with Adrian Voss. The camera zooms in on her thumb hovering over the block button, an agonizingly long beat of hesitation. But the tragic flaw takes over. Two simple words of submission. Thank you. She does not send it. She does not block him. She sits paralyzed in the cinematic silence, waiting for the inevitable ring. The sudden vibration of the phone shatters the silence. One ring, two, three. We can practically hear her frantic heartbeat overpowering the audio track. On the fourth ring, inevitability wins. She answers. Adrian's voice flows through the speaker, low, resonant, terrifyingly calm. Good morning, Lena. Look closely at the physical toll it takes on her. A cold sweat breaks. Her breathing turns shallow, her chest rising and falling in tight, panicked bursts. He asks about her sleep, his tone laced with the cruel knowledge that he is the reason she could not close her eyes. When she demands to know why he called, the audio picks up the faintest, darkest sound, a low, rhythmic exhale of pure amusement. The villain is savoring his absolute power. The dialogue here is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Adrian casually drops the... He knows she was desperately searching his name online at 3 a.m. The privacy of her own mind has been violated. She tries to fight back, her voice shaking as she labels him a mafia boss, throwing up flimsy walls of logic. He smoothly parries the blow, painting himself as just a businessman with a heavy name. The lighting catches the deep exhaustion in Lena's eyes. Her body is entirely shattered, poisoned by the lethal cocktail of whiskey and profound, aching regret. You can physically see the fight draining out of her. In this gorgeously tragic moment of surrender, her voice cracks, and she admits she has something to tell him. Picture this dynamic with me. We have seen this tragic dance 1,000 times on the silver screen. She gathers the last fragments of her dignity, announcing she is blocking his number. She offers a pathetic whisper of thanks for handling her ex, trying to write the final scene. But the predator simply rewrites the script. The pitch of his voice drops, turning into a velvet hum that bypasses her logic entirely. He issues a singular, chilling direction. Look out the kitchen window. She cries out, begging to be spared from this twisted game. Yet her body betrays her mind. It is a stunning display of powerlessness. Pulled by an invisible string, her feet carry her across the hardwood floor. She obeys the architect of her ruin. The camera follows her to the glass. Outside, the harsh reality of her new world waits. A sleek, black sedan idles like a shark in the shallow waters of her quiet residential street. Through the speaker, Adrian coldly narrates the scene, revealing his men intercepted Marcus just 20 minutes ago. It is a terrifying display of pure territorial dominance. He breaks down her ex with clinical precision. Not a killer, just a pathetic, drunk nuisance. Watch the violent shudder that rips through Lena's frame. Her stomach heaves as the sheer horror sinks in. She was being guarded, hunted, entirely surrounded while she slept. She screams that she never asked for this. The villain's voice is smooth as silk. I know, he whispers, claiming her soul. We are watching the systematic demolition of a human life. Lena frantically lists the crimes against her. The lurking shadows, the breach of her home, the unwanted saviors. His counterattack is devastatingly beautiful in its cruelty. He calmly dismantles every pillar of her life. He weaponizes the tragic memory of her mother's illness. He twists the knife of her ex's eyes, betrayal, and he even turns her gaze over Jessica, noting that the loyal friend still left her alone in the dark. The shadows swallow the room as he replaces her broken world with his own dark devotion. He admits his obsession was sealed the moment he first saw her face. The monologue is hypnotic. Lena is left entirely breathless, trapped in the center of his inescapable frame. The final act of this sequence is pure cinematic manipulation. He grants her the beautiful, hollow illusion of free will. He tells her to block him, promising his shadowy guards will watch over her for 3 more nights anyway. By painting his terrifying obsession as an honorable duty, he completely disarms her rage. And then, the ultimate power move, he severs the connection. The line goes dead, leaving him as the undisputed author of her reality. We push in tight on Lena's fractured expression. The psychological compass is spinning wildly. Who is the true monster? The pathetic ex-oxylide, or the dark god who just swallowed her whole? The seed of Stockholm Syndrome blooms. With shaking hands, she leaves his contact completely open. Let us pause and examine the wreckage of her mind. Jessica, playing the desperate role of the protective anchor, texts relentlessly. We watch Lena's face harden as she builds a terrifying new reality. She practices a flat, emotionless tone, actively lying to the only person trying to save her. She texts back that the stalker is blocked and she is safe. When Jessica pushes, hearing the wrong notes, Lena uses her pounding headache as a cheap disguise. The poison of the lie seeps deep into her bones. It is a brutal lesson for any of us. The moment we start lying to the people who truly love us, we are already lost. She is actively walling herself inside the tomb, severing her own lifelines to protect the monster waiting in the dark. The camera snaps back to the phone screen. The secondary antagonist enters their stage. Marcus transmits a pathetic, desperate plea, begging for 10 minutes in the harsh light of a public space. We hear Lena let out a dry, hollow breath, a sound devoid of any humor. She holds 7 years of miserable, intimate data on this man. She knows his tragic flaw. He operates entirely on relentless, emotional erosion. If she locks the door, he will simply throw his body against it until it breaks. A pathetic pattern he has shown time and time again. Marcus Bell does not comprehend the language of boundaries. He sees her rejections as mere pauses in the script, applying a suffocating pressure until the victim finally shatters and submits. She tries to build a fortress out of rigid rules, dictating the exact hour and the precise cafe, threatening to walk away if Marcus is even 60 seconds late. He responds with a flood of desperate, unearned affection, which she lets wash over her like cold rain. You and I have seen this tragedy before. The moment a fractured soul rejects the safe harbor, she thinks of calling Jessica, her only healthy anchor, but her fingers hover over the screen, paralyzed by cognitive dissonance. Instead, driven by a dark, pathological craving for a much deadlier guardian, she types a message to Adrian. She frames it casually, pretending she expects no intervention. But the truth is a bitter pill. We often run from a familiar fire straight into the arms of a devastating inferno. Adrian replies in under a minute, the screen illuminating her dark room. A single, flawlessly calculated sentence. Thank you for telling me. There are no demands, no suffocating threats. It is a terrifying testament to her new trauma bond that these 5 words instantly calm her violently shaking hands, soothing her in a way no healthy love ever could. The hours that follow dissolve into a gray, heavy blur. She lies motionless, staring at the ceiling, her spirit utterly untethered. When the clock strikes, she drapes herself in an oversized, muted gray coat, silently begging the world not to look at her. She walks slowly to the coffee shop, taking a seat beside the cold glass window. Life teaches us that the silent anticipation of pain is often much heavier than the blow itself. The scene is set beneath the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights of the cafe. Marcus walks in 8 minutes late, an immediate, calculated test of her boundaries. He plays the role of the broken lover perfectly, his hair deliberately damp, eyes heavily bloodshot, shoulders slumped in a theatrical display of surrender. He reaches across the small wooden table, desperately trying to touch her hand and spark the ghost of their shared past. She pulls back instantly, her spine stiffening against the chair. Right on cue, the tears begin to fall from his eyes. For 7 years, this exact performance would have sent her rushing to comfort his engineered pain. But today is different. Sometimes, it takes a terrifying new darkness to make us finally immune to the shadows of our past. Lena watches his chest heave with sobs, but feels absolutely nothing. His weeping registers as mere background noise, as though she is watching a tragic film about a stranger. Starved of her sympathy, Marcus spirals into a chaotic, panicked defense. He viciously tears down the woman he cheated with, trying to use his own fabricated loneliness as a weapon. Lena merely looks at him with deadened eyes, reminding him that while he was seeking pleasure in someone else's bed, was she sitting through a 14-hour medical nightmare with her mother. He begs Bee, promising therapy, promising faith, begging her to remember their long history. But her mind is finally crystal clear. True closure only comes when we realize the one who burned the bridge is the one crying about the ashes. You and I should pay close attention to this exact moment. Marcus buries his face in his trembling hands, sobbing that he loves her. Lena simply looks at him, her voice barely a whisper, telling him he has no idea what love actually means. When he finally lifts his head, the tears are still there, but a chilling shift alters his features. The pathetic pleading vanishes, replaced by a cold, hardened paranoia. Who is he? He demands. Lena blinks, caught entirely off guard. Marcus leans in, aggressively insisting she is hiding another man. He whispers frantically about 2 dark figures he saw outside her door last night. Men who moved with lethal precision, not like ordinary guards. It is a harsh lesson to learn. A desperate need to control often hides behind the mask of a broken heart. Who is he, Lena? The question hangs in the stale air. Her nervous system immediately registers the danger, her heart hammering against her ribs, though her face remains an unreadable mask. There is no one else, she replies quietly. He hisses that she is lying. Lena leans across the small table, dropping her voice to a calm, deadened pitch. She tells him that even if she had found someone new 5 minutes after they ended, it is no longer his business. He lost every right to her on Tuesday. It is an unavoidable human truth that challenging a fragile ego always invites destruction. The sad, weeping victim disappears in a flash. His jaw tightens, his face twisting into the same cruel sneer he used to terrify a young waiter years ago. Do not make me look stupid, Lena, he warns her softly. He is terrified of being the punchline, a pathetic fool whose woman walked away for a powerful Manhattan elite. Marcus, this is completely over, Lena states with unwavering finality. She gathers her coat, preparing to walk away forever. That is when the physical violence begins. His hand shoots out, his fingers locking around her fragile wrist. Not tight enough to shatter bone, but firm enough to remind her exactly who is stronger. Time seems to stop, staring down at his pale knuckles in the middle of a crowded cafe on Lexington Avenue. A wave of profound detachment washes over her. We often spend years sleeping next to people we never truly knew. Sit down, Marcus orders, his voice dripping with malice. She barely breathes as she tells him to let go. Behind the counter, A terrified barista watches them. The tragedy of the silent crowd unfolds exactly as expected. A woman 2 tables over stares openly. An older man lowers his newspaper to watch. Yet, the entire room is paralyzed. Lena knows the dark rule of public violence. When an abuser takes hold, the world turns to stone and leaves you to bleed alone. But today, the universe brings a violent anomaly. A large, gloved hand descends onto Marcus's shoulder, applying a terrifying steady pressure. The hand belongs to a man draped in a heavy charcoal overcoat. "Sir," a deeply calm, velvety voice murmurs. Let go of the lady's arm. Marcus jerks his head up. His face cycles rapidly from raw confusion to dawn of recognition to absolute paralyzing terror. He drops her wrist as if her skin is boiling. Adrian Voss is standing right behind him. Adrian looks immaculate, exuding a quiet, suffocating menace. His dark hair is styled with sharp precision, framing eyes that are a hollow, dead gray, a color that seems to swallow the light from the room. Masterfully wielding his psychological dominance, Adrian does not even glance at Lena. His predatory focus is locked entirely on Marcus. "Mr. Bell," he commands in a whisper, "stand up." Marcus stammers, trying to play the brave man, but the weight of Adrian's presence crushes him. "Stand up." Marcus rises immediately, completely stripped of his free will. True power never has to raise its voice. It simply expects the world to obey. Adrian speaks in a smooth, hypnotic rhythm. He orders Marcus to walk out, turn left, and never look back. No calls, no texts, no shadows left behind. The excision is surgical. "Are we clear?" Adrian asks, his tone devoid of warmth. Marcus tries to puff out his chest, to hold on to a shred of pride, but Adrian simply repeats the question with a terrifying absolute stillness. "Are we clear?" Lena watches the illusion of her ex-boyfriend shatter into jagged pieces. The man who tormented her for 7 years shrinks into a trembling, frightened child. "Yeah, we are clear." Marcus chokes out. He scrambles for the door, entirely broken, never daring to glance over his shoulder. The heavy tension in the cafe slowly evaporates. People return to their coffees, pretending they did not just witness a masterclass in psychological destruction. It is funny how quickly society ignores just among them. Only then does Adrian slowly turn his hollow eyes to look at Lena. "Are you all right?" he murmurs. Lena cannot speak. She is floating somewhere outside her own body, staring blankly at her wrist. 4 angry red marks are already rising on her skin, a perfect, brutal map of Marcus's cowardly grip. Adrian's cold gaze drops to follow hers, locking onto the bruises. Then the mask slips. A terrifying flicker of raw, unadulterated violence passes over his meticulously crafted features. It is a microscopic tremor of absolute destruction, the kind of ancient, lethal rage that tells your primal instincts to run for your life. She sees the true monster hiding beneath the charcoal coat. "I am fine," she whispers, desperately trying to build a wall between them. He tells her clinically that she is not. She looks away, reminding him she had specifically asked him to stay away. He replies with chilling logic, stating that dropping her location was an invitation, not a boundary. When her trembling legs refuse to sit back down, he simply decides they will walk. He steps close, placing a large hand gently against the small of her back. There is no force, no violent shove, just the terrifying illusion of safe guidance. Lena, whose lover just left bruises on her skin, realizes with a sickening twist that this dangerous stranger's touch is not triggering her panic. Life's most fatal mistakes are usually made when a predator makes you feel momentarily safe. She finds herself walking with him down the cold avenue until a sleek, black sedan glides silently against the curb. "Get in," Adrian commands. Finally, The dormant alarm bells in her mind scream, and she refuses to step into the dark. Adrian's gaze locked onto Lena, a prolonged, surgical dissection of her panic. Neon streetlights reflected in his dark eyes as a ghost of a smile broke his statuesque stillness. "Smart girl," he murmured, his voice a low velvet rumble rewarding her self-preservation. "You and I know this dance well. It is exactly how a predator manufactures the illusion of a sanctuary." Leaning into his idling sedan, he gave a hushed command. The black car slinked away into the fog. He offered to walk her home, vowing on his honor he would ask for nothing else. Her breath plumed in the freezing air as she challenged him, demanding why his word should mean anything. "Because where I come from, Lena, it is the only thing that does." A chilling confession of a violent world. Sometimes the darkest monsters strictly obey their own twisted codes. The pavement swallowed their footsteps for 2 agonizing blocks. Freezing wind masked the violent tremors shaking Lena's slender frame. "He grabbed my wrist," she whispered to the concrete, unable to meet his eyes. Adrian's response was a mathematically smooth confirmation he had seen everything. As she poured out her disbelief at the blind apathy of the crowd, the chilling truth of his timeline dawned on her. "You were in the shop the whole time," she realized, her voice trembling. He had stood in the shadows, actively watching her ex-lover cross the line just so he could play the savior. "That is completely insane," she gasped. "Yes," he agreed instantly, unashamed of his darkness. A helpless, broken laugh tore from her throat. It is a tragic truth of human nature that we often laugh loudest when we realize we are completely trapped. "I do not know what you want from me," she pleaded, her voice barely rising above the distant wail of a siren. Adrian halted beneath the amber glow of a street lamp. Slipping his hands into his heavy wool overcoat, he studied her. It was the detached, ancient gaze of a wolf evaluating a wounded deer, weighing the heavy cost of ownership. "I do not want anything from you," he murmured, deploying a masterclass in disorientation. He calmly listed his terms: no dates, no touch, no debts. He promised only to secure her safety and then vanish like smoke. Clinging to the shattered remains of her logic, Lena fiercely whispered that she did not believe him. She knew that in this bitter life, absolute altruism is always a mask. "That is all right," he replied, perfectly immune to her resistance. "Then what are you doing?" she challenged, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse. The silence that fell between them was suffocating, dripping with the unspoken violence of his past. Let us look closely at his face here, the tightening jaw, the hollow sorrow in his eyes. "I am trying to find out whether I am still a man who can want something without taking it," he confessed softly. He was using her as a living test of his own monstrous restraint. That raw admission of predatory hunger paralyzed her completely. They walked the remaining blocks, wrapped in a heavy, funereal silence. At her building, he kept a stark physical distance, the perfect image of a disciplined guardian. "Go inside, lock the door, sleep." 3 sharp commands and a promise her ex was handled. True captivity begins the moment you mistake your cage for a fortress. Moving like a sleepwalker, Lena navigated the dim hallway of her building. The heavy metal deadbolt clicked shut like a prison gate. She slid down the unforgiving wood of the front door, dropping her coat in a crumpled heap. Pressing cold palms to her burning eyes, she tried to remember the woman she was just 2 days ago. But that life was gone, scorched away by the hypnotic presence of her new shadow. A sudden buzz from her coat pocket shattered the quiet. The glaring screen illuminated the dark room. "I forgot to ask, did you eat today?" A ruthless enforcer, suddenly playing the tender caretaker, The sheer absurdity snapped her frayed nerves. She let out a jagged laugh that quickly dissolved into violent sobs. It is a terrifying milestone when the only person who can soothe your terror is the one causing it. Her trembling hands typed a reply. She typed a single, defeated word. No. The silence stretched before his reply arrived, commanding and absolute. He told her a sandwich was waiting outside, paired with a chilling directive: do not open the door until the footsteps fade. Instantly, the heavy, rhythmic thud of leather shoes echoed down her corridor. The sounds stopped inches from her spine, separated only by an inch of wood. No knock, no whisper, just the soft crinkle of paper hitting the carpet. The slow retreat of his boots followed, ending with the dull chime of the elevator. Lena sat frozen in the shadows, clutching her phone over her racing heart. In that breathless quiet, the chains of her new reality locked into place. You and I must understand the gravity of this moment. We only grieve the loss of our old selves when the new one has already surrendered to the dark. Picture Lena standing perfectly still under the harsh fluorescent light of her kitchen, mechanically eating the meal Adrian left behind. Notice how she refuses to sit down. Every muscle in her body is coiled tight, a physical reflection of the absolute chaos storming inside her mind. The sandwich is perfect. Fresh bread, thick meat, everything meticulously prepared. It is an intimate, quiet form of grooming, a predator anticipating a physical need to breed a deep, terrifying dependency. Her thoughts spun wildly. She felt completely insane, yet she could not stop eating his offering. Then her phone violently vibrated. Jessica. Lee, do not greet me. Open the door. I am in your hallway. Lena gasped, nearly choking. The dark, romantic illusion he was building had just violently collided with the cold, unforgiving light of reality. Lena wiped her mouth like a child caught stealing, a primal flutter of guilt washing over her as she yanked the door open. Jessica stood in the dimly lit hall, a bag of groceries in her hand, but her sharp eyes were deadlocked on the crumpled brown paper on the counter. Jessica's face was an absolute mask of judgment, the fierce, uncompromising glare of a woman who refuses to be fooled. Let me explain, Lena begged, her voice trembling, setting her groceries down like a judge's gavel. Jessica crossed her arms, instantly building a wall between them. You told me you blocked him, she stated, slicing right through the web of romantic lies. I know, Lena choked out, all her fragile defenses shattering. I lied to you. It is tragic how quickly we will betray our true friends just to keep our new monsters close. I lied, and I am so sorry, Lena whispered into the heavy air of the apartment. Jessica pinched the bridge of her nose, fighting to keep her own raging anxiety in check before demanding every single detail. Pacing the floor, Lena painted the entire agonizing scene. The sudden text, the claustrophobic coffee shop, Marcus exploding into a violent rage, grabbing her wrist, and then Adrian stepping out of the shadows like a dark god. Halfway through the story, Jessica's knees gave out. She sank into a dining chair, burying her face in her trembling hands as the horrific reality took shape. He stood there the entire time, Jessica murmured. He watched your ex escalate the abuse before he stepped in. Lena froze. The camera of her memory zoomed out. She had been so blinded by his rescue that she never noticed he had allowed her terror to happen. Jessica's voice was a scalpel, actively dissecting the twisted romance Lena had built. You and I must lean in here, because the truth Jessica unveils is terrifying. A normal person would have stopped the threat immediately, she pleaded. But Adrian let the aggression happen. He needed the contrast. He needed Marcus to be the screaming, out-of-control villain, so Adrian could glide in as the flawlessly calm savior. It was not a lucky coincidence. It was a brilliantly choreographed stage play with Lena as the unwitting prize. The blood drained from Lena's face. She stood paralyzed as the shadow of his true manipulation consumed her. Jessica let out a long, exhausted sigh. A friend forced to watch a train wreck in slow motion. "Sit down," she commanded softly. "I am going to ask you a question, and you cannot lie to me." "Do you like him?" Jessica asked, slicing straight through the thick, psychological fog. Lena immediately threw up her hands, stammering about her messy breakup 48 hours prior. But Jessica's dark eyes never wavered. She was hunting for the trauma bond, not casual dating advice. Lena's breath hitched. Her trembling hands betrayed the intoxicating confusion inside her. "I do not know," she whispered, her eyes wide with terrible shame. "There is this pull. He is so calm, Jess. When he speaks, the screaming world just goes quiet. It is a fatal error of the human heart, mistaking a monster's cold lack of empathy for sheltering peace." "I know exactly how crazy this sounds," Lena cried, fully aware she was willingly walking into a trap. "I am not a fool," Lena insisted. She crossed her arms, desperately trying to shield her shattered ego. "You are a heartbroken woman being hunted by a dangerous man," Jessica fired back. She understood a timeless truth. Grief and sudden attention create perfect victims, not fools. Lena let out a miserable, broken laugh, clinging to his dark poetry. "But he told me his word means something," she pleaded. "He said he wants to see if he can want something without destroying it to take it." Jessica stared at her friend in absolute horror. The sheer, terrifying audacity of his script hung in the air like poison. "He said that? Those exact words?" Jessica rubbed her temples, looking physically sick. "Lena, that is either a miracle of vulnerability or the most lethal sociopathic conditioning I have ever seen in my life. I honestly do not know which it is," Lena whispered. The room felt suffocating under the dim amber glow of a single lamp. They sat paralyzed in the wreckage of a normal evening, a half-empty glass of wine sitting between them like an unexploded bomb. Finally, Jessica reached across the cold table and grabbed Lena by the hand, her grip desperate. "This is the protocol," she stated. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steel. "I will not demand you block him. That wall has already crumbled, but you have to slow this down. No isolated cars, no private homes. If he calls, it happens in broad daylight, in places I have checked. You will report every move to me. The lesson here is simple. The moment we start negotiating with our safety is the exact moment we have already lost control." Jessica refused to let go until she heard the words spoken aloud. "Public, daylight, safe places." Lena repeated the rules, her voice hollow and stripped of conviction. "Are you angry with me?" Lena asked, pleading for a lifeline. "No," Jessica whispered, tears finally breaking free. "I am just terrified of where this will end." Lena had no defense left. She just held on to her friend. They drank the rest of the wine, letting it dull the panic until Jessica collapsed from exhaustion. Alone in her bedroom, Lena lay under the heavy shadows of the ceiling. The harsh white light of her phone glared from the nightstand. Adrian Voss did not reach out, not that night, and not for 3 agonizing days. Sometimes, the cruelest weapon someone can use against you is simply their deafening silence. It happened in the suffocating quiet of the second day. A physical ache settled deep in Lena's chest, cold and undeniable. She was going through withdrawal. She actually missed him. Her old life with Marcus was completely dead to her. Blocking his number felt like sweeping up dust. But the dark, lifeless screen of her phone, the unfinished conversation with Adrian, consumed every single waking thought. Her eyes darted to the device constantly, and every blank screen felt like a physical blow. By the third day, she was drowning in her own shame. You and I must recognize the simple life lesson right here. True freedom is not merely escaping an abuser. It is recognizing the quiet, comfortable chains we so willingly hand over to the very next predator who walks into our lives. She paced the hardwood floors, desperate for logic to win. "You are 29, she muttered. "You own a home, you have a career. You cannot fall apart because a dangerous man stopped texting you." She forced herself through the motions of surviving, folding laundry, buying groceries. But her eyes never left the phone. Finally, on the fourth evening at 7:42, a vibration shattered the quiet. "How are you, Lena?" She waited one agonizing minute. "I am functional," she replied. "How are you?" His reply was a calculated drop of poison. "Better now." Lena pressed her forehead against the freezing kitchen counter, letting out a broken, breathless laugh. The sad truth is, we hand over our greatest power the exact moment we convince ourselves we are still the ones in control. God help her, his conditioning was perfect. Her fingers moved across the glass screen on their own, asking if he was around for coffee. His silence stretched out, pulling the wire tighter around her throat. "Lena," he finally typed, "is that a wise course of action?" It was breathtaking cruelty. He was making her beg for her own ruin. "You are asking me," she replied, her heart hammering, "because if you ask me, I am forced to lie. Yes, tomorrow at 4 at Lexington. I am bringing my friend, and she will be hostile." "That is mathematically fair," he replied, totally unmoved. The date was set. The steel jaws of the trap were cranking open. The tragedy of life is that our most fatal mistakes are never accidents. They are choices we make with our eyes wide open, walking into the dark. Lena stood before the dim hallway mirror, watching herself split down the middle. One side was the ghost of who she was 5 days ago, safe and tied to a cowardly man. The other was this new creature, speeding toward absolute destruction. Staring into her own hollow eyes, she truly did not know which version was more dangerous. She called Jessica. At exactly 4, they pushed open the doors of the cafe. Adrian Voss was already there, swallowed in the shadows of a corner booth, dark wool coat, black coffee. As they approached, he stood up slowly. Jessica stepped in front of Lena, her whole body bracing for an impact. The life lesson is haunting, but true. The monsters we run toward are often just reflections of the dangerous chaos we secretly crave deep inside ourselves. "Miss Nguyen," Adrian murmured, extending a hand in a crafted illusion of respect. Jessica let it hang in the empty air. "Sit down," she ordered, her voice like cracking ice. She refused the waiter, accepting nothing from him. "I am going to interrogate you," she warned. "I will be hostile." Adrian just smiled. "What do you want with her?" Jessica demanded. "I am ensuring her stability," he replied softly, "because she intrigues me." "You do not know her," Jessica snapped. "You ran a web search." Adrian's eyes went dead, stripped of all warmth. "I did not use algorithms," he whispered. "I deployed human assets to legally acquire her identity. Always remember this simple truth. Real power never needs to scream or raise its voice. It just stares you down and quietly states the horrifying facts." "I needed her to volunteer the information," Adrian explained, his voice like velvet. Jessica leaned in. "Do you know about my prison record?" she challenged. "No," he replied without blinking, a flawless evasion. "How do you make your money?" she pressed. "I manage logistics for my family," he answered. "Name 5 things you ship," she demanded. Adrian gave a genuine smile, briefly warming his cold eyes. "I must decline," he murmured. "That proves my theory," Jessica shot back. Adrian leaned forward to deliver his ultimate hook. I have never allowed a woman to be harmed anywhere near me. It was a chilling masterclass in grooming. The lesson here is dark but true. Predators do not show up holding a weapon. They arrive offering you absolute protection from the very world they are about to burn to the ground. Let's pause for a second. You and I need to truly look at Adrian Voss right now. We are watching the twisted anatomy of a megalomaniac at work. Notice his opening move. He looks Jessica in the eye and claims he never takes what is not freely given. It is a beautiful lie, a way to build total dominance disguised as consent. And when she calls his bluff, he does not get angry. He leans closer, his voice dropping to a velvet whisper, swearing his word is his only currency. It is a flawless performance of a wounded soul. You and I have probably both fallen for a trap like this. The life lesson is written in blood. The most dangerous predators alive will never bare their fangs at you. They simply smile, bow their heads, and quietly offer you a gentleman's promise. Listen closely to the cold words he chooses. He talks about human trust in pure economic terms, claiming that breaking a promise costs him manpower and capital. We are seeing a sociopathic mind at work, boiling human life down to math on a spreadsheet. Jessica sits across from this void, gripping the table, desperately holding her ground. She draws a fierce line. If he hurts Lena, if he lies or vanishes, she will rain hell upon him. She thinks she is winning a high-stakes game against a monster, but she is just bleeding in dark waters. We must learn this painful truth before it destroys us. Drawing a hard boundary with a true narcissist never protects you. It simply hands them a detailed, illuminated map of your absolute deepest vulnerabilities. But then the mask finally slips. Jessica leans in and threatens to drive to Connecticut, find his mother, and tell her exactly what kind of monster she raised. For one fraction of a second, Adrian loses his balance, his eyes widen, and then he laughs. It is not a cruel sneer. It is a warm, genuine sound of shock. He admits it is the best threat he has heard in 15 years. In a rare breath of honesty, he mutters that his mother still thinks he flips real estate. The iron doors of his soul creak open just an inch. The life lesson here is oddly comforting. No matter how dangerous or broken a person becomes, shame still lives deep inside them. We all desperately try to hide the darkest parts of our souls from the very people who first gave us life. The cafe door closes. Jessica walks out, leaving Lena completely alone at the table with the apex predator. Lena nervously apologizes for her friend's anger. Adrian just waves it away. He leans back, shadows clinging to his face, whispering that it is refreshing to be threatened. It is a brilliant spin, making him look untouchable. The tension breaks, and Lena lets out a soft, genuine laugh. But look at Adrian. He does not smile back. He sits in absolute stillness. He is not sharing a moment. He is scanning her, recording the way her eyes crinkle, cataloging the pitch of her voice. Remember this truth before you give your heart away. A healthy person looks at you to share a connection. A predator only looks at you to gather the exact data they need to eventually break you. Now, the isolation phase begins. Adrian announces he is leaving the city for 5 days for a vague business matter. He is starving her of his presence, twisting the knife of anxiety into her chest. Lena asks if the trip is dangerous. He does not answer. Instead, he pulls out a crisp white card with 10 numbers, sliding it across the table. Use this only in an absolute emergency, he commands softly. It is a masterstroke of terror. He is planting a bomb of dread in her mind, ensuring she spends the next week suffocating on worry for him. This is a cruel but vital life lesson. When someone forces you to constantly panic about their survival, it is a deliberate trap. They are making sure You never have the energy left to protect yourself. He seals the cage with one final whisper. After drowning her in fear, he offers a reward, a promise of dinner when he returns. He leans in close, murmuring that wanting nothing from her is very different from wanting to sit across from her. It sounds like dark poetry. Lena can only nod, paralyzed by the emotional whiplash. Adrian walks out the doors, disappearing into the street. Lena does not pick up her phone. She does not call her protective friend. She just sits in the fading light, staring at her cold coffee and that terrifying white card. Stick with me here, because you and I are watching a tragedy unfold. The darkest lesson of all is how quickly we will abandon everyone who truly loves us, just for the fleeting thrill of a monster's attention. Picture the frame. 5 agonizing days of absolute suffocating silence. The camera lingers on the white card, resting on Lena's kitchen counter, practically vibrating with a manufactured, unbearable tension. Then, the inevitable trigger is finally pulled. At exactly 6:14 in the morning, the harsh trill of her phone shatters the quiet. It is an unlisted number. You and I know this feeling. Her nervous system recognizes the impending doom before her mind can even catch up. A coarse, unfamiliar voice on the other end calmly states that a specific situation has unfolded, exactly as Mr. Voss promised. Her tragic descent into a psychological prison begins right here. The agonizing anticipation of a disaster slowly destroys the soul long before the actual ruin arrives. You and I must watch her face in this crucial moment. The anonymous voice confirms that Adrian is bleeding, wounded, but still breathing. The handler spits out rapid, absolute commands. She must be ready in exactly 11 minutes, carry nothing but her phone, and speak not a single word to anyone. Secrecy is the fertile soil where toxic devotion takes root. Lena sits frozen on the edge of her unmade bed, the dead phone still pressed to her ear. A terrifying, icy clarity washes over her features. She stares at her bedroom door, fully aware that turning that handle means stepping into an abyss that will consume her. This is the heart of human tragedy. When we willingly surrender our light to pull a monster from the shadows, we condemn ourselves to live in the dark forever. She moves like a ghost, obeying without a whisper of resistance. The camera tracks her leaving her old life behind, deliberately stepping past the landline, crushing the urge to call Jessica for help. Down on the street, she meets the handler. His face is a map of cold, institutionalized brutality. He opens the rear door of a black, heavy sedan. As she slides into the shadows of the back seat, the heavy door slams shut with the definitive, muffled thud of military-grade armor. Lena's eyes track the reinforced glass, yet her lips remain completely sealed. Her psychological surrender has already begun. She is actively locking herself inside the terrifying prison of his dark world. The most inescapable cages are the ones we quietly walk into ourselves. Trapped in the sterile cabin of the moving vehicle, her voice breaks the silence, demanding answers. The driver hesitates, but yields, silently acknowledging her tragic significance within this violent hierarchy. He tells her a negotiation shattered into gunfire, leaving Adrian with bullets buried in his shoulder and ribs. He flatly states they do not use hospitals, operating strictly in the shadows. But then he delivers the fatal strike. Adrian has been calling her name since the moment he woke up. The camera pushes in on Lena. This feeds the devastating savior complex, so common in toxic romance. Believing a dangerous man needs you creates a beautiful illusion of control, hiding the brutal truth that you are completely at his mercy. Her panic threatens to tear her apart. We see her chest rising and falling as she tries to count her breaths, a desperate grounding rhythm her mother taught her while her father was dying. But cold logic cannot stop a heart hijacked by fear. As the sedan pulls into the hidden compound, the driver turns to face her with a chilling directive. He warns her that Adrian is a ruin of blood and bruised flesh, and strictly commands her to hide any flicker of horror from her eyes. You and I must recognize the tragedy here. She is being conditioned to swallow her own humanity to protect a predator's fragile ego. It is a cruel dynamic. The moment you erase your own genuine terror to comfort the monster who dragged you into the dark, your soul no longer belongs to you. The safe house breathes with a cold, sociopathic rhythm. Shadows shift as armed guards, an underground doctor, and a housekeeper move around her. They look right through Lena, treating her as an inevitable variable in their master's bloody equation. Nobody asks for her name because her identity is already dead. She is simply Adrian's newest possession. They guide her down a suffocating hallway into a makeshift surgical room. Adrian lies pale against the sheets, his chest wrapped in crimson-soaked bandages, a violent purple bruise blooming across his sharp jaw. Everything in the frame is engineered to shatter her defenses. For a true megalomaniac, even the sight of their own bleeding wounds is a calculated weapon used to permanently chain a devoted caretaker to their side. Let us look closely at this tragic reunion. A guard steps aside, and Adrian's dark eyes lock onto hers. Instantly, he deploys a masterful, manipulative trap. He tells her she never should have come. This brilliant cruelty forces Lena to actively declare that she wants to be there. We watch her slowly sink onto the edge of the mattress. Her trembling fingers reach out to hold his cold hand, a devastating gesture of love that completely seals her doom. Adrian tightens his grip, laughing off the bullet holes, whispering that mere survival is his only victory. Lena leans in, tears falling, begging him to stop joking. She thinks she is healing a broken man, entirely blind to the terrifying reality that she is offering her bare heart to a starving wolf. The camera stays tight on his face as he reveals the bloody truth. His eyes terrifyingly calm, outlining a brutal 30-year war with a rival criminal empire. Speaking of severed lives as if discussing the weather, he admits a rare misstep put the bullet in his flesh. Then, the master manipulator plays his most devastating card. After shattering her reality and dragging her into his suffocating darkness, he turns his face away and orders her to leave. He commands her to walk out the door. It is psychological warfare at its peak. By violently pushing her away, he ensures she will desperately fight to stay. The most terrifying predators do not bother building cages. They simply hand you the padlock and quietly watch you lock yourself inside. Let us examine the sheer brilliance of his cruelty. Adrian performs the classic illusion of the noble sacrifice. He tells Lena his driver is waiting to take her far away. He paints a tragically bleak picture of her future, commanding her to marry some nameless, boring office worker and forget he ever existed. He whispers that loving a man like him is a terminal illness, a fatal mistake she must run from. Stick with me. We know it is not a genuine act of mercy. By insulting her potential and describing a dull, loveless existence, he guarantees her fierce pride will make her reject it. He never had any intention of letting her walk out that door. He only needed her to believe that throwing her life away for his dark world was her own beautiful, romantic decision. He confesses, his voice heavy with regret, that his little experiment has failed. He wanted to see if a man carved out of violence could desire a woman without destroying her. He admits his affection is a beacon, drawing rival wolves to tear apart his prize. Then comes the masterful shift. His voice actually breaks. For Lena, watching this terrifying apex predator shatter before her eyes is pure intoxication. She stares down at his ruined body, the bloody gauze, the purple contusions, feeling the cold sweat on his skin. This is the exact, tragic birth of her fatal attachment. All logic evaporates, leaving only a blinding, irrational devotion. She looks at the monster bleeding on the sheets, and the entire outside world simply ceases to exist. She refuses to leave. The camera circles her as she speaks her own doom with a deeply disturbing calmness. Adrian closes his eyes, performing a flawless portrait of a defeated man. Lena announces her mandate. She is not walking away. She focuses entirely on his shivering, broken frame, elevating herself to the singular role of his protector. She promises to fetch water, anchor herself to the wooden chair, and sit in the darkness until the doctor returns. She demands his total surrender. A heavy, calculated pause hangs in the room before Adrian finally nods. Lena releases his hand and walks toward the exit, but stops dead at the doorway. Her fingers grip the wooden frame tightly. This is the tragic turning point. She refuses to look back at him as she takes a breath, preparing to deliver her twisted, heartbreaking vow. Facing the corridor, her voice echoes with the weight of unhealed wounds. She weaponizes her past to justify this new madness, speaking of Marcus, the coward who stole 7 years of her youth. She details the humiliating betrayals, lying to his parents, sitting in waiting rooms while he slept with other women. She fiercely declares her days of being discarded are over. The devastating irony hangs thick in the room. She genuinely believes that tying her soul to a ruthless criminal is an act of pure rebellion. She vows she will never be sent away for her own protection again. Adrian simply smiles against the pillows.
The steel door of the trap has just been locked from the inside.
She walks away to fetch his water, beautifully and entirely blind to her new chains. For 2 days, Lena vanishes into the shadows of his underground world. You and I have seen how these dark ecosystems silently digest a new soul. Marta, the ghostly housekeeper, becomes the architect of her conditioning. She guides Lena to a plush bed, brings warm food, and softly whispers that Mr. Voss is a profoundly good man, as long as he has the right reason to be. She places the crushing weight of a murderer's morality squarely onto Lena's fragile shoulders. By the 3rd morning, the doctor clears him to move. The ride back into the neon bleed of the city is draped in silence, their fingers tightly intertwined. But the moment Lena unlocks her apartment door, her two worlds violently collide. Jessica is sitting in the dark, waiting for answers. Jessica is the anchor to the sane world Lena is throwing away. The room is thick with panic. Missed phone calls, frantic texts, and an intervention built around cold takeout boxes. Jessica stands rigid, arms crossed, demanding to know where her best friend has been hiding. But the second the deadbolt clicks shut, the illusion of strength completely shatters. Lena collapses onto the sofa. A quiet, terrifying sob tears through her throat. This is not the messy crying of a bad breakup. This is the violent crash of a human body that has just survived days of pure psychological warfare. Seeing her friend crumble, Jessica drops her anger instantly. She falls to her knees, becoming the desperate protector, pulling Lena into a fierce, heartbreaking embrace, entirely unaware of the monster that now owns her friend's soul. Let us step into the dim, heavy air of this kitchen together. The silence stretches, thick and suffocating, as Lena spills her darkest truths. A normal friend might scream, might dial for help, but Jessica merely stares. Her hands move like clockwork, scraping leftover food onto a porcelain plate. The metallic clink of the fork is the only sound. When the meal ends, Jessica leans forward, her eyes entirely hollow. She will not stop this tragedy. She spent days building logical fortresses to save Lena, only to watch them crumble. The weeping, shattered girl who collapsed on these tiles 2 weeks ago is dead. In her place sits something hardened by trauma, mutated by a terrifying bond. Sometimes, the most tragic thing a loved one can do is simply let us walk into the fire. Jessica lays down the terms of her surrender, masking it as fierce devotion. Notice the slight tremor in her voice as she threatens to call Lena's mother if another sudden disappearance happens. It is a fragile fence built to hold back a hurricane. Then, leaning across the wooden table, Jessica seals the pact. She speaks of childhood vows, painting a grim portrait of the future. She pictures the police raids, the blinding flash of scandal, even the haunting image of Lena standing at her door 10 years from now, bruised and clutching a child. It is a devastating, bleeding kind of loyalty, but unconditional shelter can be a fatal gift. By offering a bed to fall back on, Jessica unknowingly pushes Lena closer to the deadly orbit of Adrian Voss. Jessica whispers that her door remains open even if Lena chooses an ordinary, quiet life. At those words, Lena shatters. The weeping is raw, tearing through the quiet apartment. 3 weeks bleed by in a muted blur. Watch Adrian closely here. He moves like a wounded wolf, slowly testing his legs in the snow. He orchestrates their meetings in shadows, dining in dimly lit, nameless rooms far from prying eyes. One Thursday night, under the jaundiced glow of a street lamp, he allows a brief, cold touch of his lips against hers before slipping away into the dark. He controls the dial on her hunger, doling out affection in desperate drops. We have all seen people wait for scraps of love like this. It teaches us how easily starvation can disguise itself as romance. The past formally dies with a single text message. Her old tormentor is finally gone. But a soul accustomed to chaos cannot stand the quiet. Lena begins to weave a beautiful, deadly lie. She convinces herself that the brutal violence of the beginning was merely a fluke. She truly believes she can dance on the edge of Adrian's dark empire without plunging into the abyss. It is a peaceful delusion, fragile as spun glass. It lasts exactly 22 days. The sky is an indifferent gray at 16 minutes past 4 when the illusion violently cracks. She is walking home, clutching a white pharmacy bag, when a shadow detaches from the brick wall. A faceless man blocks her path, and the quiet eye of the hurricane abruptly collapses. Stick with me as we watch this play out on the crowded pavement. The stranger's hand clamps around her elbow like a steel vice. He murmurs calmly, a voice stripped of emotion, ordering her not to run. But Lena refuses to crumble. Her jaw tightens, and she demands he let her go. A bitter smile touches his lips. He leans close, his breath carrying the faint scent of stale tobacco, and recites Adrian's exact coordinates. He knows Adrian is sitting in a booth on 58th Street right now. He is a mercenary, and he realizes that to cut the king, he must use the queen. He lets go of her arm, but steps even closer, his shadows swallowing her whole. True fear rarely requires a weapon, and sometimes a person standing an inch too close is enough to stop your heart. The stranger twists the psychological knife with practiced grace, issuing a chilling ultimatum. Adrian has until Friday to arrive alone and settle his bloody ledgers. If he refuses, the stranger will take a trip to Baltimore, directly to her mother's doorstep. You can see the blood drain from Lena's face. Her lungs seize. Her pulse hammers visibly at her throat as she begs to know how much he has watched them. The man's eyes are completely dead, as he delivers his final blow. He whispers that he does not even need to hurt her mother, as long as Lena believes he will. And just like that, he dissolves into the rushing crowd. Lena stands rooted to the concrete, perfectly still, no tears fall. Absolute terror is a completely silent master. For one endless minute, Lena is a statue on the avenue. She swallows the metallic taste of adrenaline, forcing her hands to still. She does not reach for her phone. Instead, she throws herself straight into the jaws of the beast. By 4:31, she pushes through the brass doors of the dimly lit restaurant on 58th Street, the pharmacy bag crinkling in her grip. She ghosts past the protesting host, her eyes locked onto Adrian across the room. He is deep in negotiation, but the second he catches the terrified tremor in her brow, he pushes his chair back and strides toward her. You and I have probably both made this mistake. We run headfirst into the burning building, fully convinced our devotion can somehow put out the flames. Adrian guides her out onto the street, his hand wrapping tightly around her waist. It looks like a lover's embrace, but it is the grip of a man securing his property. Under the fading light, Lena recites the street encounter with the chilling detachment of a ghost. Not a single tear touches her cheek. The panic has entirely burned away, leaving a hollow shell behind. Watch Adrian's face as he digests this threat to his kingdom. The muscles in his jaw turn to granite. His eyes go impossibly dark and still. A terrifying quietness she saw once before when he traced the fading bruises on her wrist. This is the look of a predator unhinging its jaw. The most profound human violence never announces itself with screaming. It always creeps into the room in absolute silence. Lena watches the slight twitch near his eye, her survival depending entirely on reading his dark moods. She begs to know what he will do next. Smoothly, Adrian strips away her choices, painting his absolute control as a desperate act of love. He commands her to pack. She is leaving for Baltimore in 60 minutes, guarded by 2 of his armed men who will turn her mother's quiet home into a fortified bunker. When she whispers a question about the blood he is about to spill, he cuts her off. His heavy hands cup her cheeks, tilting her face up in a gesture that traps her completely. He promises she will not be harmed. Life teaches a bitter lesson in moments like this. We mistake severe control for deep affection, forgetting that total safety always costs us our freedom. Watch how the trap finally snaps shut. Adrian softens his voice, making her surrender feel like an independent choice. He tells her to get on the train, to look away from the impending slaughter, and promises they can sort out the wreckage later. It is a brilliant, terrifying illusion of free will, but the chains were forged long ago. Lena looks into his eyes and finally caves, whispering that she belonged to him since that second quiet morning they shared over hot coffee. She has completely surrendered to the monster's reality. The lesson here is a brutal testament to human survival. When the strain becomes too heavy to carry, the mind aggressively rewrites its own instincts, turning the predator who hunts you into the only sanctuary that can possibly save you. The tragedy seals itself as Lena swears she will never return to the normal world. She binds herself to his shadows, choosing to cover her eyes to the violence he is about to unleash. Hearing this, a solitary tear actually slips down Adrian's cheek. We will never know if this is a genuine crack in his armor or the ultimate manipulation. Lena justifies her descent, desperately telling herself that because Adrian understands his own darkness, he is somehow a better savior than her past abusers. For 5 agonizing days, 2 armed men sit on her mother's floral sofa, sipping black coffee and speaking to the older woman with chilling politeness. It is horrifying how easily we adapt. We will gladly lock ourselves inside the most terrifying cages, as long as the warden smiles at us. The sickness bleeds into the walls of the house. By Wednesday, the air smells of baked apples as her mother serves pie to the hitman, entirely normalizing the nightmare. Lena refuses to turn on the Friday evening news, shutting her eyes to keep her fantasy alive. When Adrian finally calls, his voice is a low, victorious hum. Her breathless plea for him to bring her home marks the absolute end of her soul. A year fades away. You and I now find Lena standing behind the glass of a luxury penthouse, a heavy diamond resting on her finger. The man who threatened her simply vanished from the earth, and she never asks why. True moral decay is never a loud, dramatic fall from grace. It is just a series of quiet, comfortable compromises swallowed down with a morning cup of coffee. The harsh light of the phone cuts through the dark room, revealing the tragic softness in her eyes. It vibrates against the wood, a sharp demand from Adrian. It is a digital leash, yet her shoulders relax. She replies she is safe at home, smiling at what she truly believes is love. This nightmare began with one wrong number, a blind text that hooked a violent syndicate boss. Now, she looks at a ruthless criminal and sees only a protector. You and I have followed this tragedy to the end, and the real lesson is heavy. The unhealed wounds of our past often make our choices for us, dressing up our worst mistakes to look like absolute destiny. She has found her beautiful cage, and she will happily turn the lock herself every single time.